Convicted murderer Alex Murdaugh is now in a protective custody unit inside a maximum security prison in South Carolina.
Alex Murdaugh was a powerful area attorney, as you just heard, and part of a South Carolina legal dynasty that stretches back 100 years.
Trial and conviction of Alex Murdaugh.
Tonight from Alex Murdaugh's.
Convicted murderer Alex Murdaugh has been moved to an undisclosed protective custody unit of a South Carolina maximum security prison.
The Murdaugh Case, Part 1. A family who had it all. A bloodline full of wealth and power stemming generations back. A bloodline who not only has ties to the courtroom, but every government official within Hampton, South Carolina. When greed turns into lies, scam, and murders. When one son's drunken escapades open up the family secrets. Is the family the only one with secrets? Do you know the story? Alex Murdaugh has been recently sentenced to life in prison for the murders of his wife and son. The question of why he would have committed these murders will never truly be answered. But with Alex Murdaugh's own statements to the police, it definitely ties to his son, Paul Murdaugh, who had direct responsibility to the death of his best friend, girlfriend Mallory Beach. Since the 1920s, this family has lived in the low country of Hampton, South Carolina. This is a region along South Carolina's coast. It's a place where everybody knows each other, and one person's business is everyone's business. Historically, Hampton, South Carolina is known for their watermelon festival that originated as a competition, where people would come together to see who could spit a watermelon seed the farthest. And since the 1920s, the Murdaugh family has held an important role in the legal system. For 85 consecutive years, one family member has held the title solicitor, which is the equivalent of district attorney. And for over a century, the Murdaughs have prided themselves on their ties to the law and what the family name represents. Alex, whose full name is Richard Alexander Murdaugh, graduated in 1990 from the University of South Carolina with a degree in political science and also a Juris Doctorate degree. And within 4 years of graduating, he was admitted to the South Carolina Bar Association and became known for representing people in all areas of personal injury law. And one area in particular that he specialized in was wrongful death lawsuits. In addition to his own legal work, Alex also worked part-time in the solicitor's office for the 14th Judicial Circuit, keeping that family tradition alive. Alex met his wife Maggie when they were in college and later had 2 kids together, Paul and Buster. Buster was born in 1996 and Paul was born in 1999. With family roots dating back to the 1920s, the Murdaugh name is very well known in this area, and because of that, growing up, the boys were always very popular and definitely well known. Additionally, it was no secret in this community that the Murdaugh family was extremely wealthy. Their family spent a lot of time hunting and fishing together on their 1,700 acres property of land where they stayed while they were on hunting trips. And the Murdaughs' wealth and legal connections definitely allowed them to get away with things that others couldn't. For example, even though Paul Murdaugh was under the drinking age, his parents totally encouraged it. In fact, they would buy him alcohol, and Paul's underage drinking is actually what initiated the domino effect that really changed the Murdaugh family forever. February 23, 2019. Paul borrows his father's 17-foot boat so that Paul and his girlfriend Morgan, Miley and her boyfriend Connor, and Anthony and his girlfriend Mallory could attend the oyster roast. Driving the boat allowed the kids to drink on their way to the event, for it is known that the police were out that night checking vehicles. Around 6:30 p.m. when they all got together, Paul, who was 19 at the time, got his brother's ID and bought alcohol for the group at the Parker's gas station. You can see Paul buying the alcohol, and while exiting the store lifting up his arms, showing off the success of getting the alcohol as he heads back to his friends who are waiting for him in the car. Arriving at the oyster roast as planned, the group has a great time drinking and eating. But Paul is soon noticeably drunk beyond measures that people start advising to drive him and the group home and retrieve the boat the next day. With a drunk Paul and weather conditions of extreme fog and cold weather that night, the boat did not have working lights, which heightened a recipe for a disaster. But of course, Paul didn't listen and was alleged to be aggressive. As Paul becomes confident in driving his boat, on the way back to their destination, he decides that he wasn't drunk enough and makes a pit stop after the oyster roast. Out of this group of 6 friends, Paul and Connor both decide they want to go drink more, ending up at this bar called Luther's to take shots, while the other 4 in the group are just waiting on the dock for them. There's actually surveillance cameras that capture the 10 minutes that Paul and Connor are drinking. After finishing up, it is just before 1 a.m. when the group of 6 walk toward the boat. Mallory and Anthony were kind of the group stragglers, but they were clearly enjoying each other's company in these moments. By the time they get on the boat, the group of friends state that Paul is just beyond intoxicated and giving his drunk alter ego the name Timmy, which was given by his best friend Anthony. Though it was given in a fun light, Timmy certainly was not the ideal drunk. When Paul drank too much, he often became aggressive. That night, as they returned home, Paul was becoming more reckless as the night went on. According to the witnesses, Paul began driving the boat in circles, causing the passengers to freak out and yelling to let someone else drive in a panic. Not only was he doing donuts, he continued to hit full throttle on the boat's speed and continuously leaving the driver wheel unattended. As we all would expect, tensions were high, and Paul was yelling at his girlfriend. At one point, he walked up to her while yelling and hit her in the face while the boat was still moving. Sad to say that this was normal behavior for him. According to the depositions, there were several times that Paul just walked away from the wheel while the boat was still in motion. He also would yell at any of his friends if they tried to grab the wheel, and he would continually say, "I am the only one who can drive this boat." During these times that he would just walk away from the wheel, Connor would sometimes attempt to take control of the boat, but he never really actually got control of the boat. Paul would immediately stop him, and that was really the extent of anyone else's control of the boat. At one point, Mallory said that she felt unsafe and she asked Paul to take them back home. Just around 2:20 a.m., they had been on the water for about an hour, and Paul put the boat in full throttle through this narrow winding waterway in an area called Archer's Creek. With such low visibility, one of the friends was using a flashlight to shine a flashlight out in front of them. It was at this point where things took a turn for the worse. Before Paul had a chance to stop, he crashed the boat going somewhere between 32 and 34 miles an hour into the pillars of a bridge. Mallory and Anthony, who was sitting at the back of the boat on top of a cooler, were ejected from the boat. Anthony came up and Mallory didn't. Everyone in a panic is now shouting for Mallory, hoping she would surface, but she never did.
911, where's your emergency? Hello? Police, fire, EMS. Hello?
We're in a boat crash on Archer Street. There's 6 of us and 1 is missing.
Though Paul was driving drunk underage and also responsible for the crash, he was not the main focus for the authorities when they arrived. He wasn't even given a field sobriety test, and his phone was found in the bushes nearby and an officer found it. Instead of keeping it as evidence, they gave it back to him. And there's dashcam footage that captures Anthony, Mallory's boyfriend, telling an officer good luck due to who Paul's family was.
Y'all know Alex Murdaugh?
Oh yeah, I know that name.
That's his son.
That show driving the boat?
Good luck.
Turns out, 3 of the responding officers that night actually had connections to Alex Murdaugh. While EMS is looking for Mallory's body, the other 5 are brought to the hospital. This is when Paul is finally given a blood test to determine his BAC. Even though 4 hours had passed since the accident, his blood alcohol content was still 3 times over the legal limit. Paul's grandfather comes to the hospital and he goes from room to room and tells the kids not to talk to the police, and that he is representing all of them. Manipulative, right? It also was discovered that the officer questioning the group to gather information on the incident was also connected to the Murdaugh family. And if this doesn't sound suspect enough, somehow Connor was blamed for driving the boat. Connor's parents were even approached, indicating that their son was indeed the one driving, and that they will be protected, let alone curious about where Mallory was. In their mind, no body, no case. Connor would later hire a team of lawyers to file a civil petition claiming that he was being framed for the crash by the Murdaughs and in fear of his life. In addition, there were several officers involved in this conspiracy, and Connor and his team believed that the 5 officers purposely disseminated false information about the event with the intention of misleading the public and other law enforcement to draw confusion about who was driving the boat that night. Mallory's friends and family are just devastated that she is unable to be found. For 7 days, the Coast Guards and volunteers combed the marshes for Mallory's body. And finally, on March 3, 2019, after 7 days of searching, Mallory's remains were finally located, and she was 5 miles from where she was first thrown into the water.
911, where's your emergency?
This is Kenny Campbell. We're on the search team rescue. We think we found her.
From the night of the crash, Mallory's family and other people in the community just knew that Paul would never face legal consequences for what he did just because he was a Murdaugh. But the family was gonna try and fight for justice. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the bar and the gas station that sold them alcohol underage, and also against Paul's parents, Alex and Maggie Murdaugh, who willfully contributed to their son's underage drinking. And despite people doubting that this would actually happen, Paul was indicted for boating under the influence causing death, and 2 counts of boating under the influence causing great bodily injury. And Paul was indicted on April 18, 2019, which would have actually been Mallory's 20th birthday. But despite criminal charges against him, Paul definitely received special treatment. For example, he was never handcuffed in court during the arraignment, which is a legal procedure. He was also never brought into the police station for a formal mugshot. Instead, they took a photo of him outside of the courtroom on an iPhone 7. On May 6, 2019, Paul was brought back to court where he pleaded not guilty to all charges. The judge ended up ordering a mandatory mediation between Paul and the Beach family. This was on June 4, 2021, and it was unsuccessful. Later, it was also found that a settlement was initiated by the Murdaugh family, but Alex Murdaugh claimed to be broke. When requested to look at the family's financial records for the trial, providing the proof would never happen because 3 days later, Paul was dead on June 7, 2021 at 10:07 p.m. Alex Murdaugh calls 911 and reports that his son Paul and his wife Maggie were both lying unconscious near these dog kennels on their hunting property, and that they both had gunshot wounds. At this time, the Murdaughs were staying at their hunting property full-time.
911, where's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child just shot badly. It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son? Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennel.
Okay, and did you hear anything, or did you come home and find them?
No, ma'am. I've been gone. I just came back.
Is he moving at all, your son? I know you said that she was shot, but what about your son?
Nobody. They're not. Neither one of them's moving.
Okay. I don't want you to touch them at all, okay? I don't know if you've already touched them, but I don't want you to touch them just in case they can get any kind of evidence, okay?
I already touched them trying to get to see if they were breathing.
Okay. Well, I just don't want you to move anything just in case they can get any kind of evidence, okay?
The news of Maggie and Paul's death spread quickly. A murder mystery is playing out behind the gates of this hunting lodge here in Colleton County as one of the most high-profile families in the Lowcountry are mourning the loss of a son and his mother.
It was a long day for investigators at this property in Islandton, a rural area north of Barnville in Colleton County. The bodies of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh were found at 10 p.m. Monday night. The Colleton County Coroner's Office tells us preliminary results show both died from gunshot wounds. Margaret Murdaugh was 52 and was the mother of Paul Murdaugh, who was 22. Their bodies were discovered at a family hunting lodge off Mossel Road. According to county records, Maggie owned the property. The State Law Enforcement Division has joined the investigation into their death.
It was determined that Paul and Maggie died sometime between 9 and 9:30 that evening. And what's so strange is they were shot with 2 different guns. Paul was killed with a shotgun and Maggie was killed with a rifle. And obviously this property is a hunting property, so several guns were seized from their home. And it was later discovered that at least one of the guns that was used in this murder belonged to the Murdaughs. Due to the family being considered as high profile, and the county not having enough resources to investigate a double homicide. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, commonly known as SLED, took over the case right away. Only a day after the shooting, SLED announced that there was no danger to the public. The fact that police came to this conclusion so quickly led people to believe one of two things. Either they already knew who the killer was, or the family had been specifically targeted. One of the theories that people had right away is that maybe this was some type of revenge killing for the death of Mallory Beach. Why? Maybe because Alex Murdaugh's own statement had inadvertently suggested the boat crash as a reason.
But I can tell you that at that time, and as I sit here today, that I believe that boat wreck is the reason why Pawpaw and Maggie were killed.
Stating the crash does open a long pool of other suspects, taking the light off of him. Just 3 days prior, that mediation meeting had failed, but investigators said that everyone involved cooperated fully and provided alibis and offered DNA samples to clear themselves of any possible connection. The second theory that was going around right away was that this was a revenge killing for the death of Stephen Smith. Who is Stephen Smith? How does a boat crash turn into 5 dead bodies? Could there be more? We learned of 3: Mallory Beach, Paul Murdaugh, and Maggie Murdaugh. See part 2 on this story and see how lies, scam, and murders surrounded this family. Don't forget to comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Until next time.